Great to have you on the podcast. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me. Great to see you.
Super excited. Let's do this thing. This is your first time ever coming on the show, so typically what I like to do is give you the opportunity to kind of give a little bit of a background to yourself leading up to Neurotrack, and then give us the quick overview of Neurotrack that you would give someone that you were just meeting.
Sure. So background on me, I like to say that I like working on really hard problems. I started my career working in government at the White House, the State Department, and the Treasury Department. I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but during the Asian financial crisis, I helped to lead our communications efforts there. And from there, went into finance, worked in private equity, investing in developing countries, and then went to the UN, where I helped develop the Millennium Development Goals and lead the restructuring of the United Nations Development Program. Went on to business school, and it was then that I started to think about getting into healthcare. I come from a family of healthcare providers, and really was looking at it through the lens of a very personal experience I had with my grandparents, my grandfather on my father's side, grandmother on my mother's side, who started to show signs of cognitive decline, and ultimately both received a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. And when we went through that process, kind of despite spending, for my family members, their whole careers in academic medicine as healthcare providers, really found it incredibly challenging to get both of them, and they were separated in diagnosis by about 5 years, any kind of real accurate, efficient diagnostic information. And as I dug into the space to better understand Alzheimer's disease and how one receives a diagnosis and then the follow-up treatment, I learned that it was a bit of a wasteland. And when you step back and think about what we're experiencing now, massively large aging population, near epidemic prevalence levels of the disease, it really struck me as an opportunity to build something that could have an enormous impact on so many people and so many families. So hence Neurotrack was born, and that's what we do. We help primary care providers better screen for, diagnose, and then manage patients with cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease.
Let's talk a little bit about, kind of from product perspective, how your tech is actually assessing that cognitive health, and then let's compare it against traditional methods. I think that'll be really great for our listeners.
Yeah. So we have digital cognitive tests. These are tools that have been developed by neurologists, clinical neuroscientists, neuropsychologists, and validated in very large studies that have now been peer-reviewed and published. And these are tools that in a clinical setting live on an iPad. So a patient comes in for their annual wellness visit. If they're over the age of 65, the MA will pass them an iPad kind of at the end of capturing other vitals, so blood pressure, temperature, you name it. And the patient will we'll start with our screening test. This is a 3-minute screening test. About 80% of people who take the test do just fine, and screening for them will stop there. For the 20% who get flagged by that initial test, we will start to unlock additional tests that help us measure cognitive function through what they call different cognitive domains. So each of us has things like executive function, brain processing speed, memory, that kind of rule how we function cognitively. And so we measure those different cognitive domains. What is unique to Neurotrack and to our products is, one, our ability to do this very accurately and very efficiently. So I mentioned the first screen is 3 minutes long. As we add additional tests, we'll add a few more minutes, but we're able to fit within workflows. And that is dramatically different from what has existed in the past, which has been largely pen and paper tests, very biased, not particularly accurate, and hard to administer in that test setting.
Now, has there been any feedback you're getting from patients or clinicians that's surprised you?
Um, yeah, I mean, tons. So, what has surprised us the most, I mean, in a very positive way, is just the acceptance and the view that, so often, when a person goes in and they're told they're going to get a cognitive test, they get pretty stressed out, right? You're like, what is this? What is this? What is it going to tell me? Does this mean I have Alzheimer's disease? And so automatically when they sit down to take that test, they are, they very much have that white coat experience, but sort of on steroids. The feedback that we get is this felt like a game. It was really fun. Took away the stress. The providers love it because they no longer have to sit across from the patient and deliver it. It's self-administered. The patients love it because it's super simple and feels like they're just performing a little activity on an iPad.
Okay, another kind of part to that is how do you get as you said it feels like a game. I think if I went to my grandparents and tried to get them to take any test, they're going to be hesitant. How do you deal with is it because it feels like a game? Like how do you deal with which I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are like, I don't need this test. I don't want to take this test. It's more of not because they truly don't want to. I almost feel like it's out of fear, right? That they're going to hear something that they don't want. You know how it's so crazy that we're still at this point in healthcare where it's like, if I don't know it, I'm fine. No, like there's still a decline if you don't take the test, right? Like, it's just now and you can better deal with like what's ahead of you. So I guess how do you deal with those more, I don't want to call them difficult, but kind of difficult cases?
It's such a great question, Jared. And I love that you said that, just because you don't test for it doesn't mean it's not there. Um, it's a mix. If you think back to where we were with cancer 20 or so, 30 years ago, getting a cancer diagnosis, I mean, it's still today terrifying. But if you get a cancer diagnosis, your doctor will say to you, okay, this sucks, but here's the plan. We're going to refer you into oncology. They're going to prescribe blah, blah, blah medication. And you will have, a very high percent chance that you're going to recover and be just fine. I think one of the issues and what drives a lot of the fear with Alzheimer's disease is that for so long, there's been nothing that you could do about it, right? It was just this steady decline into this horrific state of no longer being able to remember anything. And I would say that one big piece of it is that is changing. So, we have 2 drugs that have now been approved, that the earlier you start them, the better your outcome is. And then we've got many treatments, particularly around the role of lifestyle, that can make a huge difference. So one treatment is changing. And I think a lot of that fear is driven by the stigma that exists with this disease. But the second is that, I think that so often when you might talk to a patient about this, one, it's a matter of educating them that there are things that you can do. But 2, it's, you may go to your grandparents and say, would you take this memory test? Your grandmother might say, no way I'm doing that. But your grandfather might pull you aside and say, no, she really needs this test. I think that very often what you find is that people are worried for themselves, for their memory. They're worried for their loved ones about their memory, and getting that kind of real hard data that can confirm something like that and set them on a path actually becomes very reassuring.
So how early do you recommend these tests be taken?
Well, I would love to see people start taking the tests at age 40, 45. Our healthcare system does not support that from a reimbursement perspective. What CMS says is starting at age 65. everyone must receive a cognitive screen as part of their annual wellness visit. So, and I think honestly that that's a good time to start really tracking and measuring, set your baseline score, and then monitor over time.
Yeah, I mean, when reimbursements support it, earlier is better for every single thing across the board, but they're not going to, not to say they won't in the future, but it is not something in the near term that they're going to be like, yeah, let's go 20 years earlier, right? That's fine. I've
Yeah,
always said there's so many obvious things that we should just get reimbursed for. Like, if you want to eat healthier, you should get reimbursed for it. If you want to go to the gym and you're showing you're going to the gym, you should get reimbursed for it. But no, it's just, unfortunately, our health system is, it's why it's so difficult to cure certain things, because we wait until it's almost too late, right? If you figured out someone was declining at 45, think of what you could do for their diet and everything, so that when they take that test again at 65, it's like, you're probably not going to necessarily fully improve, but maybe the decline, you could slow the decline, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we have studies that show that we can actually improve, not only slow the decline, but improve people's cognition through exactly what you said: diet, exercise, social engagement. What's interesting is we have a great partnership with the company MIDI Health, which is
Oh
focused
yeah,
on.
Joanne's been on.
Oh, good,
Is it Joanne or Joanna?
Joanna. Um,
Joanna, yep.
so when women go through perimenopause and menopause, many women experience pretty significant brain fog, and so we partner with them to allow their patients to take our test. And it really is just, as we sort of talked about earlier, it's just assuring them that it's actually not early onset Alzheimer's disease, but in fact brain fog that is caused by menopause. And if you do things like go on HRT or take other steps, you can clear up your brain fog. So there's an example of actually healthcare will reimburse for that, because it's deemed medically necessary now. But couldn't agree more on the need to do it earlier.
Will they reimburse earlier if your family had a history of that? They should.
So if you go to your doctor and say, I am worried about my memory, I'm worried that I, may be exhibiting early signs for Alzheimer's disease, the doctor can order the test and it will be reimbursed. If
Okay.
it's deemed medically necessary by your provider, your insurance should reimburse for it. It's more that starting to screen at the population level earlier has been sort of met with some pushback. But at 65, everyone can do it, and they should do it.
Okay, that makes sense. That should be like the latest you should do it, essentially, too, right? I mean, I know you can do later, but if you want to actually have a chance at seeing an improvement or slowing the decline, that should probably be the latest age that you do take these cognitive tests, right? Is that fair to
It
say?
should be, but in studies that we've run, we can take people who are older in their 70s and even their early 80s, and if they start to show some signs of decline, if you put them onto a program of Mediterranean diet, exercise, social engagement, if you've got sleep apnea or other issues, you can still continue to reduce your risk. So. Don't not test because you're not 65. Start whenever it's available to you.
That being said, where do you see digital cognitive health kind of heading over the next few years?
I think we're at a really exciting inflection point for digital cognitive health, and it's one that providers, health systems, CMS, payers are all starting to coalesce around. I think what we're seeing is great traction in getting systems, primary care providers to start testing their patient populations at scale. Which means that every individual who comes in at 65 receives a test as part of that examination. So that's number one. That kicks off everything because without, as you said, without knowing where a person stands, there aren't things that you can do for it. But what we've also seen is one on the payment side, we've seen codes, the expansion of codes for identifying Alzheimer's disease in a value-based structure. So under V28, for those value-based care nerds who are listening, we've seen an expansion of codes for the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. whenever you see new codes, it's a signal that CMS and others are paying attention and have prioritized something. So on both value-based side and on the fee-for-service side, we have new codes. We have this CMS requirement that people get tested. But the other thing that's happened that's pretty exciting is that CMMI established a program called the GUIDE program about a year and a half ago or so, which essentially takes the mainstream treatment for Alzheimer's disease, which today is really about clinical services, and has established kind of the best in class care pathways and care programs for managing a patient with Alzheimer's disease, and attached additional reimbursement codes. We've seen health systems that have been accepted into the GUIDE program, and we've seen a number of companies that have been created to deliver GUIDE services. And we partner with a bunch of them to help sort of complete the full journey of care. So from screening and diagnosis all the way to the very end where a patient is getting care. So the future, I think, is really bright for anyone who is getting older and is at risk for Alzheimer's.
What would you say like your biggest leadership challenge is when scaling a health tech company like this?
For so long, I think we just have seen a lot of failure in the Alzheimer's space in general. When I started Neurotrack, our go-to-market strategy was in working with big pharma to help them better develop disease-modifying drugs for Alzheimer's. And at the time, there were thousands, literally thousands of drugs that were in the pipeline. Every single one of those drugs failed. We saw big pharmaceutical companies like Merck and Pfizer and Janssen shutting down their programs. And so I would say from a leadership perspective, it's around continuing to paint the future vision of where we are, frankly, today, which is at long last some success. We have success in the form of drugs. We have success in the form of reimbursement codes and the prioritization of screening and diagnosis on the part of primary care providers. We have success in the form of the GUIDE program, but it's really been around, keeping people focused on the fact that despite this, the lack of initial success or validation, market validation, that we would get there. I would say the biggest issue today is one of stigma, a bit what we talked about earlier. The fact that a lot of doctors are still really afraid to talk to their patients about a dementia diagnosis. Similar to cancer, similar to so many diseases where initially the treatment solutions weren't great. We're going to get there. But I would say that's kind of one of the biggest issues right now.
I'm going to do something a little new with you to wrap this up.
Let's
Rapid fire, okay?
Let's go.
Let's do it. What's one myth about brain health you wish more people would understand?
That there are things that you could do to improve your brain health. Number one.
I love that. Any habits that you've personally adopted to protect your own cognitive health?
First and foremost, HRT, hormone replacement therapy. Second is Mediterranean diet and some supplements. But given that we're in rapid fire, I'll wait to list those out.
Where can folks learn more about Neurotrack or get involved?
www.neurotrack.com or Slice of Healthcare.
I love it. I didn't tell her to do that, by the way. She did that on her own. Thank you so much for joining me here. I had a ton of fun talking with you. I'll definitely continue to stay in touch. Would love to have you back on. And a goal of ours is to start doing more kind of live news and bringing on like contributors to say like, okay, if there was like a new announcement, right? Maybe there's a new reimbursement for that. Would love to have you on, get your take as a correspondent. So I'm excited for that. And everyone should start seeing that stuff roll out in the next few weeks after this, which I'm excited
Jared. About. We need more smart news when it comes to healthcare. So.
And we only focus on the positive. We never focus on, you can bring up something, but we're not tearing people down. We're not tearing, if there's a bill someone doesn't like, let's look at it and how do we make things better? But across the board, yeah, I love it.
Love it. Thank you so much for having me. This has been super fun. Great to
Thank
finally
you.
connect.